What if you left the stove on? What if the door is not really locked? What if that strange feeling in your body means something is seriously wrong? What if you offended someone without realizing it? What if the disturbing thought that entered your mind reveals something terrible about who you really are? Most people have thoughts like these and keep moving. But what happens when your mind refuses to let the question go? What happens when uncertainty stops feeling uncomfortable and starts feeling dangerous? You check, you review, you wash. You repeat. You ask someone to reassure you. You mentally replay what happened. And for a moment, you feel relief. But then the doubt returns. So you do it again. Not because you enjoy it. Not because you believe it makes perfect sense. And not because you simply need to relax. You do it because your mind has created an impossible demand. Be completely certain before you are allowed to feel safe. That is where understanding obsessive-compulsive disorder begins. OCD is not fundamentally about cleanliness. It is not fundamentally about organization. It is not simply wanting things done correctly. OCD is what can happen when the mind becomes trapped in a cycle where intrusive doubt feels dangerous, certainty feels necessary, and compulsion appears to offer the only way out. But the relief does not free the person. The relief trains the cycle. And that is what OCD reveals about being human. Sometimes the behavior that makes us feel safer right now teaches the mind to become more afraid tomorrow. Welcome to Grow Yourself Great. Before you can change the pattern, you have to understand the psychology that built it. Today, we are exploring obsessive-compulsive disorder, what it is not, how obsessions and compulsions become connected, why reassurance rarely satisfies it, why intelligent people can recognize that a fear is excessive and still feel unable to stop responding to it, how OCD can hide inside the mind without anyone else seeing a ritual, and how recovery involves developing a different relationship with thoughts, feelings, risk, responsibility, and uncertainty. Because OCD is often misunderstood. People say, I'm OCD, because they like their desk organized. They prefer the towels folded a particular way. They notice when something is uneven, or they become irritated when plans change. But liking order is not the same as having obsessive-compulsive disorder. OCD is not a personality style. It is a mental health disorder involving obsessions, compulsions, or both that consume significant time, cause substantial distress, or interfere with important areas of life. The person may lose hours checking, avoid people, places, or objects, damage their skin through washing, become trapped in mental review, need repeated reassurance, struggle to work, sleep, study, parent, worship, drive, maintain relationships, or trust themselves. The subject of the fear can change, but underneath it, the same psychological loop often remains. Something feels uncertain. The uncertainty feels threatening. The person responds in an attempt to create safety or certainty. The distress decreases temporarily, and the mind learns we survived because we performed the compulsion. That lesson makes the next obsession stronger. Before we can understand OCD, we have to understand something about every human mind. Human beings have thoughts they did not intentionally create. A disturbing image can appear. A violent sentence can flash through the mind. An inappropriate thought can arrive during a serious moment. A person can stand near the edge of a high place and suddenly imagine jumping. A loving parent can briefly picture harm coming to their child. Someone can be driving and experience the thought, what if I turn the wheel? The presence of a thought does not automatically reveal desire, intention, character, or danger. The mind generates possibilities. It predicts. It associates, it remembers, it stimulates, it combines information, it produces mental material without asking for permission first. That is normal. The difference is not always the appearance of the thought. The difference is the meaning assigned to it. One person experiences a disturbing thought and says, "That was strange." Then they continue with their day. Another person experiences the same kind of thought and asks, "Why would I think that? What does that say about me?" Would a good person have that thought? What if this means I secretly want to do it? What if thinking about it makes it more likely to happen? Now the thought is no longer passing through the mind. The person has placed it on trial. They begin investigating it, monitoring it, arguing with it, testing themselves against it, searching their emotions for evidence. And the more important it becomes, the more often the mind notices it. This is one of the most painful parts of OCD. People often become obsessed with thoughts that violate what they value most. A deeply caring person may develop fears of causing harm. A devoted partner may become consumed by doubts about the relationship. A religious person may experience unwanted, blasphemous thoughts. A person who values morality may fear being secretly dangerous, dishonest, or corrupt. The distress often exists not because the thought reflects the person, but because the thought attacks something the person deeply values. OCD can take a person's conscience and turn it against them. It can take responsibility and transform it into impossible responsibility. It can take love and demand impossible certainty about love. It can take morality and demand proof that no immoral possibility exists anywhere inside the mind. OCD reveals that thoughts become powerful, not only because of what they contain, but because of what we believe their presence means. One of the most important distinctions in understanding OCD is this: a thought is not an intention. An image is not a plan. An urge is not an action. A feeling is not evidence. A possibility is not a probability. And uncertainty is not confirmation. But OCD collapses those distinctions. It may say, if you thought it, some part of you must want it. If you cannot prove you would never do it, you might do it. If you feel anxious around this person, something must be wrong. If you cannot remember every detail, maybe you caused harm. If there is any possibility of danger, you are responsible for preventing it. This is sometimes described as thought-action fusion. The person may feel that having a thought is morally similar to performing the act, or that thinking about an event somehow increases the likelihood that it will happen. Imagine the burden of living as though every unwanted thought requires an investigation. Every disturbing image requires a moral defense. Every moment of uncertainty requires proof of innocence. The mind becomes a courtroom that never reaches a verdict, and OCD becomes both the prosecutor and the judge. It introduces the accusation, rejects the evidence, moves the standard, and demands another trial. That is why trying to win an argument against OCD can become endless. The person answers one question and OCD produces another. But how do you know? What if you missed something? What if this situation is different? What if the fact that you feel relieved means you are avoiding the truth? The problem is not a lack of intelligence. Intelligence can become recruited into the compulsion. The person uses reasoning, memory, research, analysis, and self-examination to solve a question that OCD has designed never to remain solved. Human beings naturally prefer some degree of certainty. We want to know the car will start. The person we love will come home. The medical test will be normal. The decision we made was correct. Certainty creates the feeling that we know what is coming next. And prediction helps human beings feel safe. But life does not offer complete certainty. You can lock the door. but you cannot create a universe in which no break-in is possible. You can wash your hands, but you cannot remove every microorganism from your environment. You can drive carefully, but you cannot guarantee that nothing unexpected will happen. You can love someone deeply, but you cannot prove today exactly how you will feel in every future moment. You can live according to your values, but you cannot prevent every unwanted thought from entering your mind. Most people function by accepting reasonable evidence, reasonable precautions, and reasonable uncertainty. OCD changes the standard. Reasonable no longer feels sufficient. The door cannot simply appear locked. It must feel locked. The hands cannot simply be clean enough. They must feel completely uncontaminated. The relationship cannot simply be loving. The person must feel absolutely certain that it is the correct relationship. The memory cannot simply be probably accurate. The person must remember with complete clarity. The moral decision cannot simply be responsible. It must eliminate every possible risk of wrongdoing. But feelings do not obey proof, and certainty is not an emotional destination that can be permanently reached. So the person checks again, washes again, reviews again, asks again, prays again, confesses again, researches again, repeats again. Not always because new information appeared, but because the feeling of certainty disappeared. This is a crucial distinction. OCD often makes people believe they are searching for information, but many times they are searching for a feeling, the feeling of being completely safe, completely clean, completely innocent, completely sure. And because no feeling remains forever, the search has no natural ending. An obsession is not simply something you think about frequently. In OCD, obsessions are recurring and unwanted thoughts, images, urges, or doubts that create distress. Common themes can involve contamination, harm, responsibility, religion, morality, sexual content, relationships, health, identity, symmetry, mistakes, or the need for things to feel complete or just right. But themes are not separate disorders. They are different doors into the same cycle. A person with contamination fears may think, what if I touch something dangerous? A person with harm-related OCD may think, what if I lose control and hurt someone? A person with responsibility fears may think, what if my carelessness causes something terrible? A person with relationship OCD may think, what if I do not really love my partner? A person with scrupulosity may think, what if I sinned without realizing it? A person with health-related obsessions may think, what if this sensation means I have a serious disease? A person experiencing identity-related obsessions may become trapped in repeated attempts to prove or disprove something about themselves. The content matters because it reveals where the person is suffering. But treatment cannot focus only on answering the content, because OCD can change the question. A person may resolve one contamination fear, then become preoccupied with harming someone. They may gain certainty about one moral concern, then begin questioning a memory. OCD is flexible. If recovery depends on disproving every possible fear, the person will spend life chasing an opponent that can always create a new possibility. The deeper work is learning to recognize the process, regardless of the theme. A compulsion is a repetitive behavior or mental act performed in response to an obsession or according to rigid rules. The goal is usually to reduce distress, prevent a feared event, neutralize a thought, feel complete, or gain certainty. Some compulsions are visible: washing, checking locks, repeating movement, arranging objects, avoiding particular items, returning to a location to make sure nothing happened. Some are interpersonal, asking, are you sure I did not offend you? Do you think I am a bad person? Did you see me lock the door? Would you tell me if something was wrong? Do you think this thought means anything? Some compulsions happen entirely inside the mind. Mentally reviewing an event, repeating a phrase, replacing a bad thought with a good thought, analyzing things, checking memories, testing bodily reactions, comparing current emotions with past emotions, praying repeatedly until it feels correct, trying to prove what kind of person you are. This matters because someone can appear completely still while performing compulsions for hours. OCD does not require a visible ritual. A person can sit quietly while their mind is exhausting itself in an attempt to reach certainty. Compulsions also include avoidance. If touching something triggers uncertainty, the person may stop touching it. If driving creates fear of causing an accident, the person may stop driving. If being around children triggers disturbing, intrusive thoughts, the person may avoid children, even though they have no desire to harm them. If a relationship triggers doubt, the person may repeatedly withdraw, confess, or seek proof. Avoidance brings relief, but relief comes at a price. The person never learns that they can encounter the trigger, experience uncertainty, and continue living without performing the ritual. The avoided situation keeps its psychological authority. This may be the most important part of understanding OCD. Why does a person continue performing a compulsion when they know it does not solve the problem permanently? Because it works briefly. The person experiences an obsession, anxiety rises. They perform a compulsion, anxiety decreases. That decrease feels like proof. The mind learns. The danger became manageable because I checked. I feel better because I washed. The feared event did not happen because I repeated the prayer correctly. I can trust myself because someone reassured me. The relief rewards the behavior. In psychology, when a behavior becomes stronger because it removes an unpleasant experience, we call that negative reinforcement. Negative does not mean bad. It means something uncomfortable was taken away. The compulsion removes the stress temporarily, so the mind becomes more likely to use the compulsion again. But there is another lesson being learned underneath the relief. The mind is also learning this thought was too dangerous to leave alone. This anxiety had to be eliminated. This uncertainty could not be tolerated. I was not safe until I completed the ritual. The compulsion does not only reduce anxiety, it confirms the authority of the obsession. The person feels rescued, but the rescuer is also strengthening the danger. OCD becomes a psychological protection system that keeps producing the threat it claims to protect the person from. This reveals something important about all human behavior. Relief is not always evidence that a behavior was healthy. Sometimes relief simply means the behavior helped you escape discomfort. Avoiding a difficult conversation may bring relief. Using a substance may bring relief. Leaving whenever vulnerability appears may bring relief. But the question is not only, did this make me feel better? The deeper question is, what did this teach my mind? Did it teach your mind that you can face discomfort? Or did it teach your mind that discomfort must control your behavior? Why reassurance never lasts? When someone with OCD asks for reassurance, the request often appears reasonable. Can you just tell me the stove is off? Can you promise I would never hurt anyone? Can you tell me I did not make a mistake? Do you think I am a good person? The family member answers. The person feels better. Then 5 minutes later, the question returns. The family may become frustrated. I already told you. But the person is not necessarily asking because they forgot the words. They are asking because the emotional certainty created by the words has faded. Reassurance can function like a compulsion performed through another person. The person temporarily borrows someone else's certainty. But because the certainty did not develop through tolerating uncertainty, it remains dependent on the next answer. And reassurance has a hidden weakness. No answer can prove the future. No person can guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen. No partner can provide permanent proof of love. No clinician can offer absolute certainty that every sensation is harmless. No parent can promise that every decision will have a perfect outcome. So OCD searches for weakness in the reassurance. How do they know? What if they misunderstood me? What if they only said that to calm me down? What if I did not explain everything? Now the person gives more detail, confesses more, asks more precisely, requests reassurance from someone else, researches online, compares answers. But more reassurance does not satisfy an appetite that grows through feeding. This does not mean families should become cold, dismissive, or refuse all emotional support. Support and reassurance are not identical. Support says, I see that you are distressed. I believe you can tolerate this feeling. You do not have to solve this question right now. I will stay connected to you while you resist the compulsion. Compulsive reassurance says, I will help you prove that the feared possibility is impossible. One strengthens the person. The other may unintentionally strengthen the cycle. OCD exaggerates responsibility. Human beings need a sense of responsibility. Responsibility helps us consider consequences, repair harm, protect others, honor commitments, and live according to our values. But OCD can turn healthy responsibility into inflated responsibility. The person may feel responsible not only for what they intentionally do, but for every negative event they could theoretically prevent. If a danger is imaginable, they may feel obligated to eliminate it. If they fail to warn someone and something happens, they may believe it was their fault. If they have a disturbing thought, they may feel responsible for ensuring it could never become action. If they make a decision affecting another person, they may believe they must guarantee the outcome. This standard is impossible. No human being can prevent every possible harm. No decision eliminates all risk. No amount of checking transforms uncertainty into control. But OCD says, if you could have done more, you should have done more. And because more is always possible, the person never reaches enough. They could check one more time, wash one more time, give one more warning, review one more detail, say one more prayer, ask one more question. OCD uses the person's values to demand behavior that eventually pulls them away from those values. The person who values family becomes unavailable because rituals consume the day. The person who values compassion avoids loved ones out of fear of harming them. The person who values faith becomes trapped in repetitive religious rituals driven by fear rather than devotion. The person who values honesty confesses thoughts and details that do not require confession. The person who values health damages their body through excessive cleaning or checking. OCD does not always attack what you hate. It often colonizes what you love. The need to feel just right. Not every compulsion is driven by a clear fear of catastrophe. Some people repeat behaviors because something feels incomplete, uneven, wrong, or not just right. They may reread a sentence, repeat a movement, adjust an object, restart a task, or say something again until the internal sensation changes. The person may not believe a disaster will happen. They may simply experience intense discomfort when actions feel unfinished. This reveals another part of human psychology. We do not respond only to beliefs. We also respond to internal sensations. A behavior can become organized around reaching a particular feeling, completion, balance, cleanliness, correctness, certainty, relief. But feelings are unstable. The more the person demands a precise internal state before stopping, the less able they become to stop without it. They no longer decide when the task is complete. The feeling decides. Recovery, therefore, involves learning that an action can be complete even when the feeling of completion has not arrived. A decision can be made even while doubt remains. A sentence can be left alone even when it feels imperfect. A person can walk away without receiving emotional permission from OCD. Real. Recognize every aspect of life. OCD narrows attention. It selects one possibility and enlarges it until that possibility feels like the entire reality. You touched the doorknob. There could be germs. You changed lanes. You might have caused an accident. You felt emotionally distant from your partner. Maybe the relationship is wrong. You experienced an unwanted thought. Maybe it reveals your true character. Notice what happened. OCD reorganized one aspect of life, then treated it as every aspect of life. This is where GYG language becomes useful. Real means recognize every aspect of life. Real does not mean force yourself to think positively. It does not mean deny danger. And it does not mean use logic as another ritual to eliminate anxiety. Real means refusing to let fear appoint one possibility as the complete authority over reality. Yes, germs exist, and human beings interact with ordinary germs every day. Yes, mistakes are possible, and possibility is not proof that a mistake occurred. Yes, relationships include changing emotion, and one moment of uncertainty does not define an entire relationship. Yes, human minds produce disturbing thoughts, and the presence of a thought is not evidence of intention. Yes, you could have forgotten something, and memory does not have to provide perfect certainty before you continue living. OCD says, look only at this. Real says, this is part of the picture, not the whole picture. But we have to be careful. Real should not become another compulsion. The goal is not to make a list of counter arguments every time an obsession appears until you feel safe. That could become reassurance performed in GYG language. Real is not an attempt to defeat every feared possibility. It is a stance. It recognizes the fear, the uncertainty, the values involved, the limits of control, the cost of compulsion, and the life that still needs to be lived. The real response may sound like this. I recognize that this fear is present. I recognize that complete certainty is unavailable. I recognize that performing the ritual will strengthen the cycle. I recognize that anxiety can rise and fall without my obeying it. I recognize that I still have a choice about what I do next. That is not denial. That is psychological leadership. OCD says you cannot move until the uncertainty is gone. Real says uncertainty is one aspect of this moment. It does not have to become the leader of my behavior. OCD is not a failure of logic. People sometimes try to reason someone out of OCD. They explain why the fear is unlikely, provide statistics, present evidence, point out contradictions. And sometimes the person already knows all of that. They may say, I know this probably doesn't make sense, but it still feels dangerous. This is not hypocrisy. This is the difference between intellectual knowledge and emotional learning. A person can know that an elevator is generally safe and still experience panic inside one. They can know that a dog is restrained and still feel fear. They can know that a compulsion is excessive and still feel a powerful urge to perform it. The brain does not update every system simply because one part of the mind understands the explanation. Emotional learning changes through experience. The person has to encounter the trigger, experience the doubt or distress, and discover that they can remain present without completing the usual ritual. That is why treatment involves more than insight. Understanding the cycle matters, but recovery requires practicing a different response inside the cycle. Exposure and response prevention. One of the most established psychological treatments for OCD is cognitive behavior therapy. That includes exposure and response prevention, often called ERP. Exposure means intentionally and gradually facing thoughts, situations, images, objects, or sensations that trigger obsessions or distress. Response prevention means resisting or reducing the compulsion that would normally follow. A person with checking compulsions may practice checking once, then leaving. A person with contamination fears may touch an ordinary object, then delay or refrain from washing beyond normal hygiene. A person with intrusive thoughts may allow the thought to be present without analyzing, suppressing, or neutralizing it. A person who repeatedly asks for reassurance may practice allowing the question to remain unanswered. A person who needs something to feel just right may intentionally leave it imperfect. But ERP is not simply forcing someone to become terrified. It should be thoughtful, collaborative, planned, and adapted to the person's symptoms and level of functioning. The goal is not cruelty. The goal is freedom. At first, the distress may rise. The mind says, do the compulsion, fix it, make sure, get rid of this feeling. But the person practices another message. I can experience uncertainty without treating it as an emergency. I can have a thought without investigating it. I can feel anxiety without allowing anxiety to choose my behavior. I can care about safety without pursuing impossible safety. I can live according to my values before I feel certain. Over time, the person learns that the obsession does not require the ritual. Anxiety can change on its own. A thought can remain unanswered. An urge can be experienced without being obeyed. And uncertainty can be carried. The deepest goal is not always to make anxiety disappear. If the person performs ERP only to force anxiety to disappear, the absence of anxiety can become another condition for safety. The greater goal is developing flexibility. The person learns, I can live meaningfully, whether anxiety is present or not. That is a very different form of freedom. Recovery is not winning every argument with your mind. OCD invites debate. It says, prove you are safe. Prove you are good. Prove nothing happened. Prove this relationship is right. Prove this sensation means nothing. But the person does not recover by becoming the greatest attorney in the courtroom of OCD. They recover by refusing to attend every trial. A person can notice the accusation without presenting a defense. They can say, maybe, not. I am not solving that right now. I recognize the urge to check. I am choosing not to perform the ritual. This thought can be here while I continue with my day. That can sound irresponsible to someone whose mind has equated checking with safety. But recovery is not careless. It is restoring proportion. A person may still wash their hands when appropriate. Check the stove once. Follow medical guidance. Apologize when actual harm occurs. Make thoughtful decisions. Practice their faith. Protect children. Honor relationships. OCD treatment does not require abandoning responsibility. It requires separating responsible action from compulsive attempts to eliminate all uncertainty. Reasonable responsibility has an endpoint. OCD keeps moving the endpoint. Treatment may also include medication, particularly serotonin reuptake inhibitors, often alongside psychotherapy. Some people benefit significantly from medication. Some benefit from ERP. Some benefit from a combination. Treatment decisions should consider symptom severity, other mental or physical health conditions, access to appropriately trained clinicians, previous treatment response, side effects, personal preferences, and the degree of which OCD is interfering with life. OCD can also occur alongside depression, other anxiety disorders, tic disorders, eating disorders, substance use, or other conditions. That matters because treatment should address the whole person, not only the most visible ritual. Family members may also need guidance. Without meaning to, families can become incorporated into OCD. They may answer repeated questions, help complete rituals, avoid triggers, change household routines, inspect objects, confirm memories, or take over responsibilities the person fears completing. This is understandable. Families want to reduce suffering, but helping someone escape every trigger can gradually shrink their life. Support should move toward recovery, not accommodation of the disorder. That process requires care. Family members should not abruptly remove all support, mock the person, create surprise exposures, or use treatment language as punishment. The goal is collaboration, clarity, consistency, compassion, and movement toward greater freedom. OCD reveals that the human mind does not merely want truth. It often wants relief. And when relief arrives, we may mistake it for proof. OCD reveals that thoughts can enter consciousness without representing identity. It reveals that possibility can feel like probability. When fear becomes the interpreter, it reveals that responsibility can become destructive. When a person believes they must prevent every imaginable harm, it reveals that intelligence does not make someone immune to psychological loops. Sometimes intelligence gives the loop more material to use. It reveals that certainty is not the same as safety. A person can feel certain and be wrong. They can feel uncertain and still act wisely. It reveals that emotional discomfort is not always a warning to stop. Sometimes discomfort is the price of no longer allowing fear to organize your life. And OCD reveals something else. Human beings often believe freedom means reaching a life without doubt, but freedom may be the ability to keep living while doubt is present. That is not only an OCD lesson. Every important human decision contains uncertainty. Choosing a career, trusting someone, becoming a parent, leaving something unhealthy, beginning something new, telling the truth, loving another person, believing in yourself. No amount of analysis can remove every possibility of regret, loss, failure, or pain. At some point, every person must decide whether life will be led by their values or delayed until uncertainty gives them permission. OCD makes that human conflict visible. It takes the ordinary desire to know and shows us what happens when knowing becomes a requirement for living. The difference between feeling safe and becoming capable. OCD promises safety, but it often produces dependence. Dependence on checking, dependence on reassurance, dependence on rituals, dependence on avoidance, dependence on a particular feeling. Recovery develops capability, the capability to experience a thought without becoming its investigator, the capability to feel anxiety without making it the decision maker, the capability to allow uncertainty without turning uncertainty into evidence, the capability to act according to values without receiving a guarantee, the capability to say, I do not know with complete certainty, and I can still choose my next step. That sentence may sound small, but for someone living with OCD, it can represent an extraordinary act of courage. Because courage is not certainty. Courage is meaningful action in the presence of uncertainty. Identity is larger than the content of the mind. OCD can make people deeply ashamed. They may believe they are the only person having these thoughts. They may fear that telling someone will lead to judgment, rejection, punishment or misunderstanding. So they hide. They avoid treatment. They perform mental rituals in silence. They carry thoughts that terrify them, while everyone around them assumes they are fine. That secrecy gives the thoughts even more authority. The person begins to construct an identity around what appeared in their mind. I had that thought, so I must be dangerous. I doubted my love, so I must be dishonest. I experienced the image, so I must be immoral. But identity is not constructed from every mental event that enters consciousness. Identity is also constructed through what you repeatedly honor, practice, choose, repair, and become. An intrusive thought is an event. It is not a biography. A feeling is information. It is not always instruction. An urge is an experience. It is not a command. OCD may produce the content, but the person can still develop a different relationship with that content. The goal is not to prove, I would never have this thought. The goal is to understand, I can have this thought, and it does not have the authority to define or govern me. Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder is not simply being neat. It is not being overly particular, and it is not a person choosing to make life difficult. It is a serious disorder in which intrusive thoughts, images, urges, sensations, or doubts become connected to compulsive attempts to reduce stress, prevent harm, gain certainty, or make something feel complete. The compulsion brings temporary relief, but the relief reinforces the cycle. The person becomes trapped, not because they are weak, but because the behavior that appears to protect them keeps teaching the mind that protection was necessary. Recovery begins when the person learns a new lesson. A thought can exist without requiring an answer. Anxiety can rise without requiring escape. Uncertainty can remain without becoming danger. A value can guide behavior without a guarantee, and a life can move forward before the mind feels completely sure. OCD recognizes one frightening aspect of life, then demands that the person organize everything around it. Real says, recognize every aspect of life. Recognize the possibility, the probability, the fear, the values, the limits of control, the cost of compulsion. Recognize the strength being developed when you resist it, and recognize that uncertainty is part of life. But it does not have to become the leader of your life. The mind may continue asking, what if? Recovery teaches the person that they do not have to spend the rest of their life answering every question fear knows how to ask. If this video helped you understand OCD beyond the stereotypes, subscribe to Grow Yourself Great, because this channel goes beneath visible behavior to reveal the psychological system shaping how human beings think, feel, adapt, relate, and grow. And if someone you know believes OCD is only about cleaning or organization, share this video with them, because people cannot support what they have never learned to understand. Understanding your psychology matters. It helps you understand the patterns shaping your life. Understand clearly, integrate deeply, grow yourself great.